That's a great question. It was probably inevitable, really, given that I genuinely enjoy all three disciplines, and I've always been a pretty active and outdoorsy person, so I'm not really surprised that I went this way in the end. But that being said, I didn't actually come over into the more endurance sport side of things until I was in my 30s, and that's when I discovered trail running, and I fell completely in love with it. It was an escape. It was a way for me to help manage some mental health challenges I had at the time, and like many newbie runners, I just ended up running everywhere all of the time. It was fantastic, and it gave me a sense of freedom and an amazing network of friends who I would probably never have met otherwise. I entered everything that I could, any race going, because I could, and unfortunately because I didn't really know any wiser, I just believed that running more and running further was better. And unfortunately, as you can imagine, this soon led to my first pretty major injury, which is a tibial stress fracture. And that happened just 2 weeks before a big race. It was a 100-kilometre race, race to the stones, and I was absolutely devastated. It was quite a harsh reality check. But on the positive side of things, it forced me into cycling and swimming for rehab. And I found that I absolutely loved both of them. So that's really what kickstarted me there. I bought my first proper bike. I got swimming again, which I haven't done since I was probably at school. Only breaststroking as well, but still, every little counts. And I loved them, but in a typical runner style. As soon as I could run again, I was. And the old habits just came back. I was running way too much, wasn't recovering well enough. And sadly, over time, I guess what I found was I just fell out of love with running, really. I became more and more frustrated with it. I was frustrated with my lack of progression or improvement. I wasn't getting any faster. I was always comparing myself to others, or more importantly, what I thought other people thought I should be able to do. And let me tell you, comparison really is the thief of joy. And I just became really sad that something that I'd loved so much to start with just really wasn't making me very happy at all anymore. And it was around that time that I started to notice the Passion Fit guys. You can't really miss their kit. And I actually knew one of their members because they had also been a runner previously and gone over to triathlon. So I caught up with them. We had a really good chat, and something about triathlon and Passion Fit just really excited me. I think it was a challenge. Certainly a challenge of learning to swim properly was going to be a big one. But there was something about what Passion Fit stood for that really appealed to me. So I reached out, caught up with Tom. He became my coach, and honestly, I haven't looked back from there. It's been brilliant. It's quite a hard one to answer. And I'll start by saying that I wasn't a complete non-swimmer when I came over to triathlon, but really all I could do with any moderate level of competency was breaststroke. I hadn't done front crawl since swim lessons at school, so I was a non-swimmer from the front crawl point of view. But that being said, I definitely did have some challenges in the early days of my swimming. I massively misunderstood just how hard it was going to be to learn to swim as an adult, and I slightly naively thought that because I could breaststroke that I'd be okay. Now maybe some people that's fine, but for me the transition from breaststroke to front crawl was quite difficult. And I'll be honest and say that it was quite scary and uncomfortable at first. Even just sitting on the bottom of the shallow end in the pool and just holding my breath underwater was something I really, really didn't like. And in fact, it was my breathing that was probably the biggest issue that I had for quite some time. But looking back now, it wasn't just as simple as learning how to breathe properly. It was my whole approach to swimming that really had to change, I think. And it took me ages to realise this. So at the start, I believed that just by turning up and swimming or just doing the drills, that I'd get better. And I was wrong. Swimming is not a sport where you get better just by doing more and by doing more of the same thing badly, especially if you're a beginner. And looking back, I think this is probably the biggest single thing that I really wish I'd taken to heart earlier, because it would have completely transformed how I'd gone about things right back at the beginning. And you're probably thinking, what on earth do I mean by that? But I mean that I wouldn't just have focused on doing the drills, but actually doing them and trying to perfect them, and trying to see and understand, visualise like how that would actually translate into my swimming. So rather than just going through the motion and just doing the movements, trying to actually visualise what that would mean when I was swimming properly. So it's not just practice, it's perfect practice. And I'll be honest that for some time I was way too focused on swimming a certain distance. So in my case it was anything over 100 metres, so we're not talking big distances here. And rather than doing that, really what I should have been doing was thinking about the process and the things I needed to do to be able to physically swim 100 metres well and properly. So thinking about the process, not the end goal, is quite subtle, but it's quite an important difference there. And again, it took me ages to realise this, and it culminated in a pretty uncomfortable conversation with Tom, again not long before a race, which I actually ended up deferring to later in the year, which was the best decision I ever made. And it was really there where I had to admit to myself that my whole attitude and mindset to swimming had to change, and how I approach things had to change. And really once that happened, everything started falling into place. Yes, I did still have breathing challenges, like physical breathing challenges to overcome, but fundamentally I couldn't actually work out why I was having them, because I was so focused on swimming over 100 metres. I just couldn't think about anything else. My head was just not able to concentrate on the stuff that really mattered, which is so silly looking back. And as it turned out, my breathing issues were actually linked to just simply not breathing out properly. They were just not exhaling properly. I was taking deeper and deeper and deeper gulps of air and just not exhaling any of it out at all. So I ended up hyperventilating and just having to stop before I passed out, as you would do. And I remember really clearly the day that it all turned around, because I'd taken myself on my own down to Cheltenham Lido and given myself a good talking to, and basically just said, get in, swim and breathe out. And don't worry about anything else, just swim and breathe out and keep going. And I did. And I ended up swimming, I think it was about 1 kilometre, which was easily 10 times further than I'd ever swum before. And really what that proved to me, that it wasn't a physical barrier, it was all up here, it was a mental barrier. And honestly, the feeling on that day was just amazing. So I guess the lesson here really is try and relax as much as possible, breathe out properly, get the basics right, and yeah, especially if you're a novice, I think those are the 3 really key things. And there are 2 other things I kind of want to mention, so I hope that's okay, because I've been talking a few minutes now. I think the first is to accept just how hard swimming will feel at times. Your perception of effort will be different just because you can't breathe out when you want to. It's not like being on a bike or running. You've got water to deal with. You can't choose when you breathe. And learning to override this and understand that you can keep going is really, really hard, but it's worth the effort ploughing through, because you'll be amazed at just what you can do and how much further you can go. And I think the second thing was forcing myself out of my comfort zone and swimming with other people who were better than me. It was completely terrifying at the start. I felt massively out of my depth, but I learned so much. And in part, it was how hard I could actually push myself to keep up and hold on to someone's feet. But it also forced me to swim better as a result of that. And I was a better swimmer because of that. So yeah, definitely worthwhile putting yourself out of your comfort zone, and once you can, swim with people who are better than you. Can I have 2? I'm gonna have two anyway. Honestly, I think the first has to be learning how to approach my training in a different way, and quite simply that quantity does not equal quality. All of a sudden you've got to go from balancing not just one discipline but three, and alongside a busy job where I was previously out on the road pretty much all the time, I simply couldn't get away with doing any junk miles or sessions anymore. Every session had to count, even if it was a low intensity or easy session. I couldn't just run anymore because I wanted to, there was no point, and I very quickly realised just how tired running made me, and how much it would, if I got it wrong, how much it would actually affect my other sessions, because I was tired or fatigued. And I learned that the hard way many times. And I'll be honest, I still get it wrong now sometimes, but there we are, we're only human. And I think the second was to learn to trust the process. And that is way harder than it sounds, especially if you're coming over from being a runner to triathlon. It's not just understanding, but also believing in the process, because honestly, consistency, patience, a bit of resilience along the way will get you there. But you've got to learn to embrace it. You've just got to embrace it and learn to hopefully love the process and the journey just as much as the end result will be, because that's really, I think, where all the fun lies, and where all the amazing experiences that you have will come from, will be on the journey getting there. And one of the things I guess I love most about triathlon is how to balance all three disciplines, because you can pretty much guarantee if you're nailing one, one of the others won't be quite on point, and it's always that balancing process, and it's fun. Right, so I'd say first, join a club or a coaching community where you can have support and advice and guidance from others. Because honestly, there is so much to learn about this sport at the start. It's quite overwhelming. And if you've got people that you can go to with those stupid questions, because trust me, we've all had them, is absolutely invaluable. Don't underestimate it. I'm really fortunate to be part of the Passion Fit community, where I'm surrounded by others with an absolute wealth of knowledge who have helped me out on many occasions, including helping me to pack my bike bag the night before a flight, and also helping me to take off my pedals, because I didn't even know what pedal wrench was, certainly didn't have one. So definitely having that support is absolutely invaluable. I think secondly, you don't need to spend a fortune to get started in tri. There is a bit of a myth that it's a super pricey sport, and you can make it as expensive as you want to, I guess, because there is a lot of kit involved. But genuinely, I know of loads of people who've borrowed bikes and all sorts of kit just to get started with. So I would say, to this end, get some trusted, credible advice on what's essential at the start and what's a nice to have. Because it can be quite intimidating to see others with all the gear, maybe no idea, who knows. But honestly, having the lightest carbon bike probably doesn't mean an awful lot if you don't train consistently, put the work in. So get some advice before you part with any of your hard-earned cash, I would say. And again, I'm really lucky to have Phoenix Evolution and Lydia to go to, certainly for bike advice, because arguably, I guess this is probably the area where you could spend quite a lot of money, and spend a lot of money in maybe the wrong places or the wrong kit. So take the time to find a place where you trust to go to for that advice for, because it's really easy to make poor choices here. And if you can't find anyone, drop Phoenix a line. And I think finally, two more points, sorry. If you're a novice swimmer, I mentioned this already, take time to get the basics right, and I would definitely invest in getting your swim analysed, especially if you are a beginner and you know that, or this is your weak area, because honestly, it will be the best money you spend. Absolutely huge amount you'll get out of it. That, and obviously practice lots, but make sure it's perfect practice, not just practice. And I think the final point, tip I'm going to give is just be consistent. Be patient. You're in it for the long game. Enjoy the ride. You'll have good sessions and bad sessions, and remember why you started, where you want to get to. Don't get caught up with other people and what they're doing. Remember why it was that you got started, and just keep going, and hopefully you will enjoy it as much as I have and am.